Good evening, all. I'm not sure how many of us are listening to us today from wherever in the world. It's quite interesting how we can use technology to really spread our wings and how we can be connected all over the place. It's quite amazing. I hadn't thought this was possible to our society 2 years ago, but here we are. Our society, like so many others in the world, we consider ourselves to be citizen scientists in one way or another. We don't have academic training in botany, horticulture, or agriculture. We're just normal people that have an interest and have developed a bit of knowledge in a field that just interests us. What's interesting is the academic botanists spend more and more time counting alleles of DNA on their computers or studying proteins and their funny effects on humans. This has put us as citizen scientists into a very nice niche. And this niche is being used by things like iNaturalist and other virtual herbaria, where people like us can find something and post our observations. But then every now and then, one of us actually hits the jackpot. Our speaker today, Chris, is one of those. He was knowledgeable about grass aloes, and then he was at the right place at the right time to find something which was a new species. I don't think the academics go and do that anymore, although I'm sure there are some that still go into the bush and have a look around. But I found that the grass aloes as a group need a very particular niche. And it's a niche that I find very difficult to emulate in my garden. So I've not been very successful at growing these things. And maybe, Chris, you can share your experience and knowledge with this whole group of very, very interesting plants, some of which are increasingly threatened, and let us enjoy them. Chris, over to you.
Thank you, Harty. Can everyone hear?
Yes.
Excellent. First, I have to have a quick word of thanks for my two teachers, Keith and Colin. As you heard, Keith was coaching me up until a few minutes ago. So I'll probably make a few blues along the way. But let's see how we go. We tried to get a preview screen so that I could at least know what was the next slide coming along. We didn't manage to get that right the second time around, although we got it right last night. But without that, I won't have a prompt. So when the thing comes up, what you see is what I see. And I'll then have to take it from there. What I've done is tried to break down the aloes into the Reynolds groups, the Gramin aloe, of which there were or are 6. And then the section Lept aloe, of which there are 16 in Reynolds's book, and there are now another new at least 6. And then just to round out what kind of looks like grass aloes as well, there are certainly a couple within what are now being classed as the bulbous aloes, and I'm going on the Gideon Smith book, which I presume many of you know. I see it comes up in reverse, but that's the book that I've used to get distribution maps. And where I haven't got photographs, I've just put that page up. So I've cheated a little bit to try and get it all inclusive. So here we go. Fasten your seatbelts. There are about 80 slides. And welcome to you all from not so cold Johannesburg. We're warming up again, folks. Spring is on its way, and today is the 1st of September. So happy spring day to all of you. Let's hope that everything is going to start growing again, and some of these terrible frosts are going to be over. So the first one we're going to pick up is Aloe albida. You'll see that is only found on the border between Mpumalanga and Swaziland. It's basically behind Barberton, on the the Saddleback Mountain and a bit further. It's a delightful little aloe and one of our few whites. It has this little lipped perianth, and there's another one in this group that shares that, namely Myriacantha. So those are the two that have this bilabiate mouth, but it's very distinctive. If you found one flowering, you would have no difficulty in identifying it. It's when they're not flowering that it's a bit difficult. So here they all are in flower, and they just are really, really pretty little things. The next one we're going to go on to is Minima. Now, Minima, you can see, has a much bigger distribution, and it's two disjunct areas of South Africa, and there are quite a few that you'll see coming along. By the way, I don't know how many people are sort of au fait with all the taxonomy rules and so on, but you'll see that we have words ending in II. That'll generally mean that it's named after a male person, and if it ends in an AE, it will mean it was named after a lady, like Saundersy, for example, being a lady, and Mr. Kraus being a man. So those are two of the broad rules, and then if it's got an ensis on the end, it's usually indicative of the place where that is found. And there are a few other rules on sort of Latin type male, female, etc. But we won't go into those. But you can all get steal a bit of a march on some of your less knowledgeable friends when you hear Challisii. Oh yes, well, yeah, that was a man. Saundersii, that was a lady. And so we go. So let's keep moving. Lovely little aloe. This is a picture taken by Philip Nell, and I'll come back to him in a couple of times in the course of the presentation. Slightly pinky purple, but very difficult to see when it's not in flower. It's a challenge, as with all of these. Most of these slim ones. Myriacantha is a very interesting thing. You can see a disjunct distribution here, but what this map doesn't show you is that it literally is found in a great big part of Africa. I see I've moved this thing, I beg your pardon. Let's see whether we come back to it. We've gone to Parviflora, and I've managed to move the screen somewhat. Keith, I don't know how I correct that and why I played around. I shouldn't have done.
I'm not quite sure what's happened. If you go down towards the bottom left, you might get some additional controls where we can look in to see if there's a way to adjust that.
Can everybody see that as a complete picture?
That
I've
looks
also
visible.
got a scroll bar up at the top there, which is blanking a bit of my picture. But again, you can see those leaves are really, really not that visible. This is a leaf. If we blew it up a bit, you would see that there's some very, very fine teeth there. And this is quite characteristic of anything that is a grass aloe. You've usually got spots at the base of the leaf on the underside, and you've got these very, very fine teeth. So that's what they share with the rest of the aloes. Otherwise, the flowers are typically aloe. And don't forget, these things were in the Liliaceae when we had much broader definitions. And now, of course, it's getting a lot more complicated. So this is what it looks like a bit close up. Very, very pretty little thing. And you can see when it's in amongst the grass, if there were no flowers there, you could be looking for weeks before you found these plants. There we go on that one. So that was, let me just get myself, that was Parviflora. Quick story on this one. I was going to show you the picture, and maybe the camera can pick it up. There it is there. It was the only aloe that Reynolds did not find. This was Mr. Berger's drawing of it when it was found, probably in the 1800s. But Reynolds, found just about every other aloe that was available at the time, but he never found this one, and it's near Botha's Hill. But it is just so difficult to find. And if it wasn't through the good help of this friend of mine, Philip Nell, who actually lives down in Natal, we would never have found this. But it's not far from the Comrades course, by the way, at Botha's Hill. Now, whether it's widespread from there, who knows? These guys sort of keep a bit of an open dot. They make the dot a bit bigger. It could be a little bit further afield than that. So that was Parviflora. We come on to Saundersii. Now this little guy has as its heartland and homeland Nkandla, and for those of you overseas who don't know, this is the home of our ex-president, and a house which us taxpayers all paid for, not through being willing givers of money, but that's the way politics happens. So Nkandla is the type locality of this little guy, and it's a very, very pretty thing. Reynolds speculates that this is probably the smallest of our aloes, and I guess it probably is, except there's been another one found, which I'll maybe show you a picture of later. It's not in it's Lilliputana. It's not in some of the main books as yet. Aloe Bowie, I've put this in. This is one of the bulbous ones you can see down in the Eastern Cape, around Uitenhage. I've looked for this thing and never found it in habitat. I think there's been so much development down around P and Uitenhage that a lot of the habitat has been wiped out. But you can see the sort of grass-like structures. I think there are quite a few people who probably have this in their collection. And in fact, the one that I have, I bought from Colin. And when he had a look at my collection the other night, he said, "Oh, I recognize the pot." So it does grow well. It doesn't like frost, so it needs to be kept warm. So let me just go on to Aloe inconspicua. I see these things have moved a bit. Inconspicua is an understatement for this little aloe. It is inconspicuous to an extreme, because even the flowers are green, just to make things a little bit trickier for you. And there is one there. You can see that some browsing animals chomped the leaves down a bit before the flower bud pushed up. So you can see in amongst this grass, not easy to spot. But there's one looking from the side, which is starting to get a bit easier. I don't know how good the photograph comes on your screens, but you can see the dots or the spots and the very, very fine teeth on the edge of these leaves. So that's our little inconspicua. It grows outside of Escourt. Again, lots of development. There's a native settlement there, which is wiping out large portions of where this thing was originally found. We're hopeful that there is privately owned farms nearby that have still got it, but when Philip and I visited this locality, it really was getting degraded pretty quickly. Nymphoides. Now, the name here, for those of you to come back to the taxonomy thing, oides means it looks like something, and it looks like a Knipophia. So when this thing was first found, it was thought to be a red hot poker. So it looks like a red hot poker, but it isn't. But you can see again a twin locality, split locality, and you can see that it has an underground bulb. But once again, if we didn't have the flower, you can see very, very tricky to pick this thing up. But it's once it's flowering, it's easy to find. So if you get it in the right season, but you can see these very, very fine leaves, difficult to find. Modesta, lovely little aloe, twin localities, Dahlstrom and Wackerstrom, which have very similar climate, altitude, and a few other aspects. So those of you who are birders will know you also get Dahlstrom. So these plants have also they've been isolated over the millennia, but a lovely little thing, and it's the only scented aloe on the African continent. So it has a lovely scent. All the other scented aloes are on the island of Madagascar. Whether this makes it a precursor of Gondwana splitting off, we'll have to have other people tell us about that. But it's a delightful little aloe. And here you can see one with that's forming a bit of a clump, and those flowers just haven't quite opened yet. You can see down the base here again, if you didn't have the flower buds, very tricky to see. Another one, just giving you a photo, the flowers are open now and often pollinated by little beetles. Keith, I don't know what happened to that one, but some of you may have the flower head on your screen. I've got this taskbar thing, which I'm going to see if I can move. Ah, okay. Yeah, it just comes into the screen by the looks of it. So hopefully you guys can see that. I might have to put this back up the top. When they open, quite obvious. This one is near Verloren Vallei. We'll be talking about Verloren Kloof, but this is Verloren Vallei. Some of you who know a lot about orchids, I hope you've been there. Most beautiful spot. It is between Op de Berg and Dahlstrom, and it's a very, very nice little reserve. You have to get a sort of an invite, and then you get somebody who escorts you around. But for flowers, it is absolutely marvelous. So that's where this locality is near. We then get on to Boilii. You can see pretty wide distribution, but I have no separate photographs of Boilii. So this brings it on to the one that was named after me. It's a bit embarrassing, this, and what happened was we were walking the mountains at Verloren Kloof, and we came down through this little neck here, which is called Vluchtelings Neck, a name given by the current owners because there used to be many, and Coney, I think, is the tribe, people living here, and they actually got attacked by a lot of other tribes, and they reckoned that this was probably the area that they escaped through to get up onto the higher ground. Now this south-facing slope here was where this thing was first found, purely by, well, somewhat by chance. We had walked the whole day. We'd literally been on our feet for about 10 hours, and I was looking for Aloe williana. I stopped to relieve myself at about that point, and I thought I could see some orange flecks up on these vertical cliff faces. I got my binoculars out, and I thought, oh, this is interesting. I found williana. So I took a very small cutting of it, And this eventually took root and eventually found its way down to Kirstenbosch. And fortunately for me, Ernst van Jaarsveld was doing a PhD on the cremnophytic aloes. He's one of the few botanists who's got the oomph and the fearlessness to actually climb places like this. And as a result, as a very modern botanist, he has discovered at least 70 new species over the last 10 or more years, maybe 20, maybe 30. But he's an absolutely fearless character. He's as hard as nails. He'll walk in the bush for hours and hours without any seeming, help, even a sip of water. Anyhow, eventually he came to look at the locality, and he said, "No, this thing is distinctive." And the next thing I knew was a cryptic phone call one day, and he said, "Did somebody tell you about that locality, Chris?" And I said, "No, I found it purely by chance." And he put the phone down, and I didn't hear anything for quite a while. And the next thing is an aloe came out, and between he and Bram van Wyk, they published it. So to tell you that how species come about and how they get cited, it is a bit of a hit and miss affair, and sometimes can be purely by a whole lot of odd things coming together. So here it is. It's a diminutive little thing. It grows out of moss banks, but you can see that its gene structure tells it that those leaves can turn down, and even in a pot that happens. So that's another hint that it probably, is definitely distinctive from a few of the other grass aloes, namely particularly Woolliana. And we'll talk about what happened. So this was the man feeling very happy at a later stage. You can see it's a cliff face. Please don't encourage your children to do this. It's not advisable, but there you can see some of the other. I think I was at this point with Ernst van Jaarsveld. Now, he wouldn't have ventured onto that ledge without a safety rope. So I really did feel a little bit foolish being there. So we'll leave it there. You can see not many flowers and only one seed formed there. But a lot of these cremnophytic aloes that form suckers and clumps, I think their vegetative reproduction is so good that they probably don't rely that much on the sexual reproduction. But you can see these moss banks, when that pod opens and you get an updraft of wind, the seeds get blown into these moss banks, and that's where you get the young ones taking root. So that may be a duplicate, but you can see it's really on these vertical cliff faces, and incidentally, it's southern facing, so it's adapted perfectly to take advantage of the cool slope when it's very dry in winter. It also will grow where you get seeps. So where you get a strata change, you'll get moss formed, and that is a water seep, and that's where it will take root. So very, very well adapted, south-facing slopes. Only in summer, when it's getting rain, will it ever get into the sun as it is at this point here, which is flowering in about November, mid-November. There's another view of some of them on these cliff faces. Interestingly, when this aloe was trashed by somebody, I'll tell you the story, he took a picture from a pal of mine that showed this cliff face. There are none on that face. There are only some on this face, which is south facing. This here is east facing. So they're very, very specific about what they like. But you can get the idea. What is often the case with a cremnophytic thing that grows on vertical faces is you get this U-formed flower stalk, and it'll upturn. Interestingly, when the artwork was done for this thing, it was from a pot-grown plant, and it was growing more or less upright, which was a bit uncharacteristic. So that was Aloe challisii, and we now move on to, I have got this. Can everybody see this? Is this Chortularian?
Yeah, no, we
Yeah,
can see
yeah, thank
perfectly.
you. I've got a bar there, so I can't see it. Now, this thing used to be very, very widespread in the mountains around Barberton, and you can see these clumps here. If only the mountains were like this these days, we would see thousands of them. But unfortunately, the mountains are no longer like this, as I'll show you in a moment. But it's a very beautiful thing. And you can see why there are now so few of them, because the mountainsides are covered in trees. And the reason that we've got them here is this is a fire break. So it is the original vegetation, and they are still there. But these are just tiny strips that protect the trees. So foresters are not necessarily our best friends when it comes to protecting plants. And there are certainly some people who actually hate foresters for this reason. I don't have too much of an opinion. But it is a very pretty thing. And you can see the dried leaves of last year, and the new ones appearing here. This one, incidentally, is fire dependent, so it won't flower if it hasn't had fire. Not all of them are like that, but some of them are, some of them aren't. So this is one of the fire dependent flowering species. There you can see the new shoots coming on, and last year's flower pods, but you can see a very corky stem, which is the fire protection mechanism. And I did a little paper for the plant specialist group some time back, where I was putting together a sort of a thesis that as they grow on the steeper slopes, these things, they don't need fire protection. So they're very soft, and they have no corky stem. But get down to these ones, like Chortularian, and this is on places where you get a lot of fire. So this is their fire protection mechanism. And as the slope gets steeper and steeper, so you have less and less of a corky stem. Incidentally, the name Chortularioides means it looks like Chortularian, and that's where it got its name from. Next one is Condii. This is one of the newer ones. It was called the Clerkii at one time, but that was a name that was disallowed. It had been used somewhere else, and it was named after Jill Condi, who's the wonderful artist that maybe some of you know and have met. She heads up the Botanical Art Society of South Africa, BASA, and she's a lovely lady. She's now retired, but her artwork is absolutely exquisite. So it was delightful that this got named after her. It looks very similar to Nubigena, but it is distinctive. Again, you see these very fine teeth along the edges. So that's what it looks like in habitat, dried or flower. The next one is Cooperi, and this is one that many of you will have seen in gardens. It's widely used in the horticultural trade now, and even the yellow ones are quite freely available. Very deeply keeled leaf, and that's one of its most distinctive features to separate it out from some of the the other grass aloes. That's the yellow variety or species color form. Crabii, this is an aloe which again was discovered behind Barberton on the Malalocha Mountains, named after Charles Crabb. And it was Charles, rest his soul, he's not alive and with us anymore, but he was the guy who was very, very agitated about Aloe challisii being named, because he had just written the Bible on grass aloes. And while a couple of us said to him, wouldn't you like to have a look at this thing and see if you want to include it in his book? And he dismissed it very, very strongly, and eventually went into print to say that it didn't even deserve ecotype status. So it can be quite a nasty business taxonomy, believe me. But Ernst van Jaarsveld, who did the citation with Bram van Beek, he was encouraged to challenge the man in print, much like Bruce Bai and the Japanese Hayashi have a war. Eventually, Bruce Bai's heart specialist said to him, Bruce, if you go into print once more at war with Mr. Hayashi, you're actually going to die. So I strongly recommend you stop going into print and disputing what Mr. Hayashi has to say. So it can be a nasty area. But anyhow, Charles Crabb was a fantastic botanist, and I think he was very miffed that it didn't get into his book, which was then the new Bible of Grass Aloes, and some of you, I'm sure, have it. He stuck religiously to Reynolds' names, and the only one he raised again, which Reynolds put into as a subspecies of Chortleroides, was Aloe williana. And Crabb, I think very rightly, resurrected it back to species level. So he was a fantastic botanist, very, very wide knowledge, very good writer, wrote some very good books. He did one on the geophytic pelargoniums. If any of you are lucky enough to have that book, it's wonderful. This is the countryside that we're talking about, the the mountain land between South Africa and Swazi. There's a road that is now fully tarred, and if none of you have been on that Bulembu road, you're in for a treat if you ever take it on. It's a beautiful, beautiful drive. If you've got sharp eyes, you can see the old book Alva and here, Superfoliata, but this is the territory of Crabii, Condii, what else would I get here? Arborescens, Superfoliata, I've said, Albida. It's just an amazingly aloe-rich area. So do yourselves a favor if you've never done that drive from Barberton to Bulembu. This is another one, picture of Charles Crabb's Aloe, Crabii. Beautiful little thing, quite similar to challisii. And a few people said, oh, you know, is it really a new species? But that's typical of taxonomy, the lumpers and the splitters. The next we get onto is Dominella. The origin of this word is, this name is a bit strange, but the only thing people can think of is that where it grows, it tends to dominate. So if you want to believe that, fine, but it might have well been found by a lady by that name, who knows. Beautiful thing around Escort, Greytown, Howick, that sort of area. This is the view from my friend Philip Nell's house, overlooking the Moy River, and he has this thing growing on his farm. Incidentally, Marty, you would be maybe interested, but we have talked about maybe getting a couple of these books printed off. Philip wrote this book, and it's printed in very low numbers. They're probably not more than 10 or 15 in existence. And for that reason, it becomes a bit expensive. But that's my friend Philip, who has forgotten more about aloes than most people are going to learn. And this is on his farm. So this is Dominella, which you can see is dominating this picture. Grows in this sort of habitat, broken land, and you can see often seeks protection from some rocks. Pretty little thing. Also needs fire to flower, and that's what it looks like when the flowers have died off. And sometimes I put this picture in when we're looking for some of these scarcer aloes. The flower heads often do turn black, and that will often give you a clue in the non-flowering season. Next one is Eclonus, very widely distributed, as you can see, and various color forms. So some lovely ones. This was Mari Vale Bird Sanctuary near Nigel. You can see many, many of them. They get wiped out by agricultural activities, even mowing. There was a lovely colony growing next to one of the old main road going to Witbank, and I went back a year or two later and it had been totally wiped out because some farmer kept mowing that particular portion. But it's a beautiful thing. This is the yellow form, and you'll get this salmon pink form, which is beautiful. And then you get this, sorry, these are the deeper pinks, and I think you would term this more the salmon pink, but an absolutely beautiful, beautiful grass aloe. Slender aloe is how it is now called in the new book. Furrii, pretty rare, up near the tunnels, and growing on dolomite, discovered by Mr. Furrii. It's not in Reynolds. It's one of the new ones. So Challisii, Condii, Sharonii, we'll pick it up in a moment. Furrii, Crabii, and Neil Crouchii. None of those were in Reynolds, and indeed some of them are not even in Gideon Smith's book with Bram van Wyk. So some of these, I do have a couple of photos, but I couldn't find them in time. Glangarpies, very interesting, again talking taxonomy. This thing was misprinted when it was first published, and it was published in I think something like a monthly sort of women's journal or something. But publication is publication, and once it had appeared, it cannot be changed. So even the guy who wrote this thing up, he tried to change this to Glangarpiesi, and of course the rules of taxonomy don't allow that. But it was found on the mountain slopes of Glangarpiesi, which means the mountain of the wolves or the hyenas, and it is a beautiful find if you can get to that area. So it's between Wakkerstroom, near Wakkerstroom. Integra, beautiful thing. The name Integra is that the leaf edges do not have much in the way of teeth. They're entire, so integral. This picture was taken by Mr. Judd, our very own. Beautiful, beautiful picture with those water droplets. Absolutely gorgeous. And these pictures found their way into the Aloes of the World book, but they are quite stunning. And as you all know, Judd is an amazing photographer. Judd Kirkelvelwish, those of you who don't know his surname. Aloe Krausii, you can see some of the similarities with Crabii. Again, getting down into the sort of Bulwer area, below the mountains. Linearifolia, I have never found it, but I believe our chairman knows exactly where to find it, because he hangs out in this area here along the coast. I've never seen it in habitat, but it's a beautiful thing, and I've looked for it on many occasions in this sort of area, but never found it. So, Harty, you'll take me there one day, hopefully. Microcantha, we're getting down into the Eastern Cape now. A big colony around Port Elizabeth has probably been built over by now, but that was an area that you could find it quite easily. And as I say, it's probably all gone now. But I think when it gets towards the mountains, it's more protected. Neil Crouchii is one of the new ones, named after Neil Crouch, who's a great aloe man. And you can see a very, very corky and big stem, but otherwise it's very similar to boilii. And this was named just not too long ago. Small distribution area, Natal Midlands, but again, beautiful thing. This one, Nicolsii, is possibly a sad story. That little dot literally is a locality where there were about, I don't know, 30, 40 plants. My friend Philip tells me when he last went back there wasn't one. So that's unfortunately the predatory nature of collectors. And why a lot of people will not give type localities when they publish these things. They simply hold that information for themselves. So that's Nicolsii. Nubigena, it means it lives in the clouds, and indeed it does. Some of you will recognize that as God's window. And yes, you are looking into God's world up there. It is quite magical. But there it is growing on the cliffs. This had to be taken with a fairly long-range lens. Again, you can see the spotted nature of these leaves, almost invisible, tiny, tiny thorns. And you have to take a few chances leaning over the edges. But again, you can see the typical upturned inflorescence of these cremnophytes. Sharonii, another new one, named after a lady with the first name of Sharon. And this was actually a Cooperi until that one was broken out, but there are some very distinctive features to it. I haven't seen it, unfortunately. Soutpansbergensis, up in the Soutpansberg only. A lovely thing. It grows well in hanging baskets and is well worth growing. Thomsonii, you can see with the AE ending was Mrs. Thompson. It grows up on the Volkberg. I've not seen it in locality, but we have been on the farm where it occurs, and we just never got back there again, Philip and I. Now we come to one which a lot of you hopefully have seen, because it's our aloe. And as many of you will know, this used to be the branch name of the old Succulent Society, South African Succulent Society. We were the Verekunda branch, which was the forerunner of our new society, Johannesburg Succulent Society. Beautiful thing. This is in the wilds, so it's protected, fortunately, opposite St. John's. It grows on the south side. Again, I think it gets it gets some aspect that it requires, but it's always on the south side. There you can see things have chomped down this particular one. This one wasn't in the wilds, but you can see how animals like these things. But fortunately, the flower buds will come through and it will reproduce. But it's a beautiful, beautiful aloe. So that's our Aloe veracunda, belongs to us in Joburg. Another photo. Fossii, another one of these things from the Soutpansberg. Rare thing, difficult to find. I've never found it in habitat. This is a new one from the Barberton area. And for the life of me, I'm afraid I have forgotten its name. But we went up into the locality with the plant specialist group, and we did a population count. It's a pretty rare thing. You can see it looks a little bit like chortleroides, but it's yellow. But the leaf forms and the woody stems very much like that. But it's distinctive, particularly the fact that it has a more sparse capitate raceme, and as I say, it's always yellow. I think we have come to the end. So thanks for your attention. We've hopefully covered about 35 species there. The only ones I didn't cover were what were the chortularians that are now Aloe bergeriana, Aloe jepii, and Aloe subspicata. But those were the chortularians that are no longer. So chortleroides has a slight history behind it, named after a plant that now is not recognized anymore. Thanks for listening, folks. Let's get on to a bit of chat.
Thank you very much, Chris. This was quite amazing. When in the year do these things flower?
Harty, they are pretty much all summer flowering, okay, spring and summer. So these ones that have taken a winter burn would come through in the spring, and then others are right into summer, because they can get, wiped down by fire, and the whole growth process has to start again.
My question is based on, I've seen sort of two types here as you've gone through. You've got these very corky stems, and you've got ones that are pretty much flush with the ground. Now, you said that that's about fire protection. My curiosity is about whether the ones that have corky stems also have the bulb. I can't remember which one you showed us, but there was a particular image with two bulbs from a plant. Now, that if there's no bulb, yes. So if there's no bulb, is that now also indicating that that corky structure is also playing the role of a little bit of water retention?
I presume it's Keith, because I can't see you on the screen.
Yes, me.
Keith, the bulbous ones, interestingly, have that bulb, I think, for the very same reason as bulbs have bulbs, because there's either very severe frost and or fire. This has a corky stem to protect it from fire, but no bulb. The only bulbous species that we have covered tonight was Cnipophoides. So if you looked at Gideon Smith's book, he breaks out the bulbous species, by the way.
So the bulbous species are related. It's not sort of just convergent.
Yes, I think it's convergence in the sense that, well, don't forget they're all Liliaceae, many of these things. But yeah, that bulb is a rare thing in aloes. Fimbrialis is a bulbous species. Bulbi was going to say bulbicollis, but I think I may be wrong. But there's probably half a dozen to 10 that have a true bulb. But of the ones we've covered tonight, it was only Cnipophoides,
Right.
which was the thing that looks like Cnipophia. I'm just trying to find it again. So the thing that looks like a red hot poker but isn't, wherever we covered it, there.
Right.
So that one has a bulb. And in fact, if we go to that page, you get a sneak preview. There it is there.
But is it really a bulb? Is it not just more an underground stem with the leaves having been preserved and more succulent than what's above the ground?
You know, Harky, you're picking up an interesting point here, because you can see they've also got these fusiform roots.
And the
I'm
roots
not
also
sure.
look quite succulent.
Yeah,
Hmm.
very much so. But, you know, those fine leaves turning into these, you know, scales of the bulb, not quite sure about that, to be honest. And of course, you know, it's a pretty rare thing. So, you know, if you have one, you don't go cutting it up in too much of a hurry. But that was a nice question, Keith. So yeah, the only one with a bulb that we've covered tonight would be this one.
Wouldn't you call Bowie Eye having a bulb as well?
Good point, eh? Good point. And now I didn't put Bowie Eye up because Gideon Smith and Co. group Bowie Eye. And incidentally, I only discovered tonight that Bowie Eye wasn't covered by Reynolds. And there's a reason for it, that at that time it was named, it was a Aloe. So it's not in Reynolds. But yeah, I guess that is almost, because I've propagated that, I think it's almost a bulb as well. Artie, yeah. Let me see if I can just pull that one up quickly. I was going to put it in the talk, and then I think I ran out of.
You've got it in your talk.
We did it, did we?
Yes, you did. Yeah.
Okay, let me just see if it was down towards the bottom.
Because Bowie Eye was one of those that if you've got a burn in the felt, it's completely gone, and then with rains in spring, you get complete new set of leaves coming up.
Absolutely, as you would with many of these that are subject to fire. Yeah. So my little thesis about the aloes that you find on the vertical cliff faces, helped along by Ernst van Jaarsveld, I might say, he said, Chris, you realize that those things growing on the cliff faces don't need the protection of aloes growing elsewhere. He said, have you ever chewed a leaf? I said, Ernst, I never chew leaves of aloes because my mouth lands up like this for a day. He said, well, chew it because you'll find there's no bitterness because it doesn't need protection from predatory ungulates. No thorns, of course, because it doesn't need them. Up on a cliff face, very succulent. Again, nothing much up there except the odd baboon, which does chomp them. But you can see those sort of characteristics there. not much of a woody stem at all. Very soft leaves, and very, very fine thorns. And I can promise you, you can chew the leaves without gagging. So these are all things that Ernst van Jaarsveld recognizes were adaptations that these particular aloes didn't need. So they got left behind on these, or adapted to these cliff faces over the millennia, and were thereby differentiated from their brothers and cousins. As I say, you can grow this thing in a pot, and it will also turn down and hang. So that also seems to be in its genetic makeup. As does Aloe hardii, and a couple of those others that I can think of that grow on cliff faces.
Now, from the book shots that you showed, it appears that a majority of these aloes are coming from the east of South Africa, very much northeast as well, around Eswatini and Mpumalanga. So there was one that you mentioned that was in sort of near the Cape in words fled me now. One of our great biomes.
Yeah, Maria Cancer,
Right,
Eastern Cape one. But I think what you spotted there, Keith, and in another talk that I've done, taking from another paper, in fact, the hotspot of aloes was thought to be sort of Central Africa, but they find their way down the spine of the Drakensberg, and then on either side, and then going up through Africa, they follow the Rift Valley. So there's some quite interesting stuff there. And of course, they obviously are widely represented in Madagascar. So they took off to Madagascar once Gondwanaland broke up. So they're pretty ancient. But as I said, we only have one scented species, where Madagascar has a few.
Right.
And if some of you would like to join my bucket list sometime, I've definitely got to get to Madagascar before I die. But going to visit aloes could be an expensive operation. I think a motorbike or something similar would be probably the way to go, but I think I'm getting a bit old for that. But yeah, Madagascar, a wonderful country.
So there's nothing really happening in the northwest of South Africa with regard to grass aloes.
Not with grass aloes, no. But of course, the aloes are distributed around the edge of the escarpment going up the west coast, Keith. So that's very aloe rich. And again, following the edges of the escarpment.
Sure. Fascinating.
I have a question, if I may ask. And it's not to Chris, actually, it's to Harty. Harty, I know that you have cultivated Aloe furei, which is a very, very rare aloe. It's one that has a tiny, tiny little distribution area. How did you do it, and what kind of conditions do you require to make this thing work?
Well, it's probably one of the easiest of this group of aloes, because it doesn't need that high humidity. It doesn't need the mist and things like that. I grow it in bags with all my other aloes, and they just get a little bit more water than the rest. So I actually have little difficulty with growing that one. I think it's the
likewise, Harty, I concur. I would say just very well drained sandy soil.
I think the really challenging ones are the cliff dwelling ones. They are really difficult to emulate their favorite growing conditions.
Archie, I think that's largely true. Pity I can't show you any of this thing. My last couple of clones are actually with Andy DeVet at the moment. He's going to try and propagate more of them, but they do very well in hanging baskets. So you can emulate that cliff face in that way.
That's still much more water than you'd give any of your other aloes.
Yes, sir.
It's certainly not water-wise gardening.
No.
And it do some of these need a lot of fog and so on? Because yeah, does one have to do that, or is it enough if one just waters them a bit more regularly?
Lulu, these things survive with, without that sort of fog stuff. I've done a job on my slides. Let's leave them for now. The ones that I have grown, you don't even really need to mist them, but you do need to water them more often than you would others. Every other day, or in winter maybe twice a week or something like that, just to keep them damp.
So it's like in summer 3-4 times a week, and winter twice a week, which is far more often than I would water my other succulents. Yeah, so it's kind of the normal watering regime times 2. Is that correct?
Maybe.
Okay.
Mm. And these ones, particularly challisii, that's embedded in the moss. Obviously, that's very different to. Obviously, that's very different to growing in normal soil. Is that substrate closer to something that you would get with an epiphytic plant, or?
Keith, again, great question. That moss bank thing really is a nursery foundation, if you like. They eventually grow through that moss layer, so the moss will trap those seeds, and the seedlings develop in that moss. It's obviously on a seep, so it's getting fed with water. Even in winter, it's damp on the south slope, as I mentioned, so it's staying on the cool side. And those roots, those fusiform roots, will eventually anchor, deeper in behind the moss. So it'll find some soil there. There is always a bit of a layer of soil on these cliff ledges, etc., where it grows. Little pockets of soil.
Sure, and I see Henny's just popped a question through that says, how long will the seeds be viable for grass aloes?
I'm not an expert on this, but I think pretty much the same as most aloes. And in my experience, not many aloes seem to survive after a year or more. The viability drops off very rapidly. And I think that's a common factor. If anybody can add to that, I'd be interested to hear.
Most of the seeds that I've collected in nature have had a viability, I would say, in a couple of months at most. I tend to sow them that season still.
Mm.
Yeah.
Having said that, this is what I've been told, and I've never tried it. It's invariably futile to try and salvage them from nature and transplant them. They do not transplant well.
Mm.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, I'd like to quickly I don't want to put an end to the questions, but I'd just like to acknowledge some people joined us. So we'll just run through here. So I don't know, I came in late. So we see Shahir, John, Earhart, Ria, Gail, Penny. Colin was here from the beginning, Nikki and Bets. Thank you very much for joining us. And then we do have a particularly special guest that I'd like to talk about, and that's Al. Aloe from the BCSS, who has come along, the editor of the BCSS, for those that don't know. So thank you so much for joining us. We're really happy to have you here. So the BCSS journal is called Cactus World, and I believe there's a monthly newsletter as well. So thank you so much for coming along.
Thank you for having me along. It's been a real pleasure. An absolutely excellent talk, Chris. Thank you very much for your wonderful presentation. Been to a few of those places, brought back some great memories. Nice to see Philip Nell again. And yeah, we hope to collaborate with you, with the two societies, collaborate together, publicize each other's activities. And the world's a small place, isn't it? You can't actually travel to go on some of these habitats from the UK, but we can certainly see them via Zoom. So thank you very much.
Lovely to have you, Al.
Welcome, yes.
Thank you.
And welcome all the members of your society.
Awesome. And we've also, so there's a message here from John, who says he's the president of the San Francisco Succulent and Cactus Society. So that's absolutely awesome. Thank you so much. And he says you heard about this from BCSS e-news as well. So it is really wonderful. I mean, to think that 2 or 3 years ago, we certainly wouldn't have been perhaps pushed into this position where we could be online. So we have to see the silver lining in all of this, but it's really wonderful that we can collaborate and share this knowledge. We look forward to continued communication, and yeah, and then just to let you know, so let me check up on it quickly, but on Facebook right now, we've also got about, I think it was 15 when last I checked, 15 people tuning in, and we'll put this up on YouTube as well, so no one's going to be missing out at all. We'll make sure that this is available through all of our different avenues. And yeah, we obviously, this is not for profit, it's for the love of the thing that we all spend our time and money on. Time being the more important of the two, but money being the limiting factor, perhaps.
John, would you like to switch on your camera and say hi to all of us?
Camera's on.
Yeah, I think I can see John there.
Yeah. Hi. So my camera is on, I think. Yeah, I'm from the San Francisco Succulent and Cactus Society, and I'm also a member of the BCSS. So I do get their e-news. That's how I heard about this. We actually have been doing our meetings online since the beginning of last year, since March or maybe May of last year. And one of our first guests was Jason Sampson, who I think you may know as an aloe expert from near Johannesburg as well. And yeah, it is exciting to see presenters from other countries and be able to communicate like this. And I also started something called the Succulent Broadcast Network, which is a calendar where we keep track of groups that have their Zoom presentations. And I'd love to maybe talk to Keith or someone later about adding your meetings to that calendar and just letting other people around the world know that you are having meetings. So please do get a hold of me. You can find me on Facebook easily by my name.
Beautiful.
Permission granted.
Okay, great.
Yeah, no,
great.
Harty's the man to talk to, but we'll certainly we'll formalize it. But that's absolutely awesome. Yeah.
John and Al, we have a monthly newsletter which I edit, and We have the express wish that many people read it. It's free of charge. So if any one of you or your members or your fellow society members would like to be added to the email list, then you must just say so. We don't require people on the list to be members of our society, because we kind of feel that this is our few cents worth of making succulents more known in South Africa and further abroad, and to help with conservation issues, etc., etc. So if anybody would like to get onto our mailing list, you're more welcome.
Okay, great. I'll find out how to do that. Thanks.
Yeah, so Carol's just said if you want to sign up for the email, you can go to jhbss.info@gmail.com. But also, if you pop us a message to Facebook or anything else. And also, please remember, if you ever happen to be in South Africa, I don't know why you might happen to be in South Africa, but if you happen to be in South Africa, you know where we are. We'd love to make some close contact, and I'm sure we can point you in the direction of some interesting nurseries, some interesting sites all around the country. There's a wealth of knowledge. I'm not the one that can do that, but I can point you to people who can, like Chris.
Same is true for Al, of course. Al, if you or one of your
Yes.
society members ever lands in Joburg, and yeah, you guys must pop in and must, make contact. It would be nice.
That would be great. Yeah, I'll be first in line.
We'll keep the kettle on.
Great.
ETA?
As soon as they let us out of the country.
And
Actually, getting out's not too bad. It's coming back in.
Mm.
Coming back in, that's the problem.
Well,
Alan,
you might have
Okay.
to just quarantine in Socotra.
I'll quarantine anywhere as long as it's not here. As long as if there's succulents there, I'll quarantine there.
Al, you make a very valid point about that quarantining. With our rather depleted currency, that little week as a guest of Her Majesty at a probably third-rate hotel at what is it, £2,500 or something.
Yeah,
I know it equates to about 30,000 rand.
yeah.
So my daughter landed up here in November, and we've not been able to send her back. So we've we've inherited our daughter again.
But things are changing all the time. There's more people around the world are getting vaccinated, and hopefully things will get back to some kind of normality again. Always look on the bright side.
Absolutely.
Well, I think our plants have not got an issue with COVID, so that's a great thing.
Yeah, and COVID was a massive driver of gardening. So there were a few interesting studies, not the best research. I'm sure that more validated stuff is going to come along soon, but that a lot of people fell back on gardening for the various benefits that it offers, which is, I mean, it's a bit sad that we've had to fall into it, but it can only bring us joy. So it has been very positive for some people. The online gardening communities, that's the thing that I've read most about, but it's scaled by a factor of 10, the number of people that are engaging and asking gardening questions. So there's really some awesome awesome sides to it. Like you say, the plants don't really care too much, so we can still
And
enjoy
also
them.
succulents and cacti have become much more popular. And I'm going to be moving house soon, so I've been looking into getting a new greenhouse, because we need greenhouses here because of the cold winters. And the waiting list to buy a greenhouse or a garden shed or garden furniture is up to anything between 4, 5, 6 months.
Sure. I'm in the wrong industry.
Yeah.
Oh, I think there's some YouTube videos on like DIY greenhouses with plumbing materials. And,
Mm,
you know, I look forward to seeing your befores and afters.
I've done that before. I've built my own out of old windows before now, but this time I want a real one to see me to the end.
Quality only.
Absolutely.
Have you considered moving to South Africa?
I have thought about it, but then there are certain problems out there too, aren't there?
Yeah,
We've
but
got more aloes than you,
Going
Al.
back to the
we've got more aloes, and the gasterias grow like weeds. So,
Yeah.
so
But Al's a
nice it
Sansevieria
balances.
man,
Ah,
or Dracaena.
No, I did a 3-week trip in South Africa just looking for gasterias actually once.
mm.
So yeah, I do like gasterias too, and aloes.
So coming back to grass aloes, I wonder whether with summer around the corner, hopefully winter is going to now just leave us in peace. But maybe after we've had our show and our fest, maybe some of us can just get together and at least look for Veracunda, because I've seen it once and it was amazing. But if you look for it any other time of the year, you can forget it. Or maybe somebody feels like really energetic and can organize a weekend for us so that we can go along that famous road that Chris was talking about from Barberton to where, Chris?
Bulembu.
Blembo.
Bulembu. Never heard of
Bulembu,
it.
which is the border post with Swaziland.
Mm.
Oh,
And
Okay.
then we go, and from there we go on down to Malolocha Nature Reserve, which is an absolute botanical gem.
Here we go.
yeah. So maybe somebody has a lot of energy and can, just take this and run with it, and maybe we can make a long weekend trip out of it or something. I don't know. Maybe somebody has the energy.
Yeah, let's set our eyes on Veracunda for now. We know that it's growing in the wilds, just off the side here. I mean, I'm very near to that. Like walking distance, stone's throw. So we'll start there, and then we'll work it up to, once the fever's going, we'll work it up to a nice trip.
So
Yeah.
coming back to Veracunda, it's Christmas flowering, by the way. And that's why a lot of people have missed it, because they're away at the sea. So just remember, Christmas.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah, I saw that one of the pictures that you took there was on the 29th. 2019, I think. Yeah, but definitely, I mean, at the beginning of this talk, if you'd asked me about grass aloes, I mean, I'd hardly ever, the first I heard of them really was a previous talk by you where you mentioned challisii. Well, it wasn't a talk by you, it was someone else brought it up. But it's amazing how inaccessible this knowledge is until you join some sort of club or something else. It's just, I've only actually, I mean, I can count the number of talks that I've attended on both hands. And I started knowing absolutely nothing. So thank you very much, Chris, for sharing with us. And I had the pleasure of coming over to your house yesterday to help you with your presentation. Well, not help you with the presentation, but help with Zoom, and got a chance to see some of your collection. It was absolutely awesome. So just a nod to the fact that this community is so giving and sharing. It was very special in these times.
Always a pleasure. Raiding each other's collection is a great hobby.
Oh yeah, we don't have to go all the way to Eswatini if we can just go to Chris's garden here.
If I'm there, you won't raid anything in Eswatini or anywhere else. You can raid gardens, but not nature, please.
No, shan't be any raiding. I have no intention of swelling my ranks with plundered loot.
Chris, may I ask, in terms of Chris challisii, Do you have any plants at home, and is it something that is able to be looked after here in Johannesburg, or should we just leave it to its natural home?
Carol, I know you put a message through to me that you would like to get some of it. I've only got one pot of it left, and it's not with me at the moment. It's actually with Andy DeVet. And Andy is going to try and propagate these things a bit. And whether he does that through proper cloning, I don't know what he intends to do. But they're not that difficult to grow, but one just has to, keep them a bit cool and nice and damp. And as I say, hanging basket, ideal. So they're not that special. You just have to adapt your growing conditions for them.
I think you're being a bit humble. Obviously, it's very special.
Well, as I say, Andy's going to try and, probably commercialize them a bit, and then we'll see how he does with his propagation. Because
I'm sure he's going for tissue culture here.
Well, I know that Andy,
yeah.
And I've been working with him a bit because we found a once-off yellow form of Aloe yangensis in Zim. So we and I think probably similar to you, Chris, we're handing over a few plants, and I know he's an amazing custodian, and we'll see at our Joburg Succulent Fest, because he's been working on little small 9-centimeter square pots of special plants, collector's plants, that he's making available to the people who really do collect and look after them. So he's really working hard on kind of the preservation side, and not necessarily the commercialization of that. And he's got his hybrids that he makes a lot of money out. But
his bread and butter here.
Yeah, I from speaking to him and Quentin Bean, it really sounds like, and I trust them with plant material, because I can see stuff coming out, like I've got some beautiful lilliputanas. So I've got two, so I'm keeping them apart, and one of them's flowering, and then obviously as proper collectors we can try and collect that pure seed and then share it back to Andy, and hopefully kind of expand and preserve these special plants.